Hello, hello. Are you interested in being a guest on more podcasts and expanding your audience and growing your business? Then you're going to need a professional and good-looking one sheet. The following audio and video, if you're watching on YouTube, is taken from a webinar I recently hosted. Enjoy. Being a guest on more podcasts and expanding your audience and growing your business? Then you're going to need a professional and good-looking one sheet. The following audio and video, if you're watching on YouTube, is taken from a webinar I recently hosted. Enjoy. This is designed as a get-together and as a work session. So what I would like to happen here is I'd like to go over some basic information about the podcaster's one sheet and talk about that, and then find out, along the way, please jump in. You can raise your hand or just jump in if there's a pause. This is a pretty casual thing. I like to do it that way, and everyone can get their questions answered. And if you have a one sheet that you have may be held by others also. And then that way we can all learn and we can get something practical done. Does that sound like a good way to go, folks? The objective, again, is to get that one sheet out here, right? And that's what we want to do. But I want to be clear on the right podcast. So I'm going to share my screen. So you should see podcast guesting success up there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the one sheet, it basically falls into the middle of the whole process of getting on the right podcast. So you've got to know your objective with the podcast. There are many objectives. And I know, I'm assuming you all understand the power of podcasts and getting your message out there and reaching new audiences. And that's why you're here. So objectives can be varied from getting more folks on your email list all the way to the other extreme, which is to build up your SEO, because your host will give you backlinks. And for some people, that's the one objective. Okay, then you've got to find the right podcast to be on, connect with the host, contact the host. These are two separate steps. The next step is to provide your one sheet. And that could happen when you're contacting the host, or it could be after the host expresses some interest when they have some basic information about you, and then you provide the one sheet. So we'll talk about that as we go on. And then there's preparing for the interview, of course, your call to action, very important, and then the follow-up. So we're going to be talking about, it helps the host to simplify their work. Within the one sheet, you should have a brief bio. You can provide a longer bio, but there should be a brief bio in the one sheet written in third person. Very important. You may have a first person bio on your LinkedIn page or on your website, for example. But if you're contacting a host that's going to put that on their show notes, you want it to be in third person. The one sheet also allows the host to know more about you. And we'll talk about the contents of the one sheet and what's pertinent to the host. And it has links to contact you, to previous speaking events that you might have been on. You might have a speaker's reel, which I know the larger podcast hosts are interested in the speaker's reel. And here's the important thing. You may not even need a one sheet. All right. So if you're just starting out, it's probably what I have found, and probably what you'll find also. Getting on the smaller podcast is easy. It's fairly easy if you're in the right niche and you're providing the right value. And they may not even ask for a one sheet. But having this information available and knowing where it is and having it organized is going to help when you do contact and talk with the host. If you haven't been on podcast and you're not a professional speaker, you're not a famous athlete or influencer, whatever that might be, you might want to start with smaller podcasts because you can make mistakes. You can refine your craft by starting on the smaller podcast. And then that way, when you get to the larger podcast, you're dialed in. Your talk is dialed in, your call to action is dialed in, and all of that is going to just increase your credibility and your authority positioning. Does that make sense? So let's just get into the one sheet and talk about the contents of the one sheet. The contents of a one sheet is what I have up there now. So it's just a list of things that you could have on your one sheet. Now, I would say there are some things that are obligatory here, like a picture and your name. Right? And we'll look at a couple of examples of one sheets real quick. This is my one sheet. It's got my picture here, obviously a quote from a past client, some contact information, a phone number, biography written in the third person, suggested topics, suggested questions. And I'll make these slides available to you. Okay. And some folks will put their podcast guest appearances and a couple of links. I've been on so many podcasts, I just link to a page on my website that has all of that information there and the podcast that I appeared on. And then at the bottom, just a bunch of links. Okay, so this is just one example of a one sheet. This is another one from Anastasia. It's a little bit different than mine. They're all going to be a little bit different than mine. And a lot of it depends on your personality, what you like, perhaps what your graphics designer likes if you're using a graphic designer. This is another one from Ann Bennett. Nancy didn't use the colors that Ann used. Ann has a number of colors in there. Nancy has a simpler one sheet. And then we've got one from Claudia, route. She went the WordPress route. And so she built hers in WordPress. So the message here is you don't have to get so fancy like some of these, like this one or this one here. You can start out just like this. Now, if you want to, you can hire someone to do your one sheet. And I was looking today on Fiverr. I found Fiverr better. I like to use Fiverr or Upwork, but there are many others also. And Fiverr, I just typed in the search one sheet. And this is what came up. So on Fiverr, I was able to find the one sheet. On Upwork, I didn't find anyone who had one. I didn't spend a whole lot of time, I have to admit, but I didn't find anyone who had one sheet specifically on Upwork. Fiverr, there's from $50 to $15, and I'm sure upwards of that. Right. So if you want to have someone do it for you, you can do that. Fairly simple to do. This is Batman's one sheet. It was late at night and I had to get this done, so I figured I'd have some fun with it. And this is one I could actually provide to you in an editable. I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, can everyone mute yourself, please, unless you're talking in the room? Thank you. And then I can provide this to you. You can change all the text and change the picture and all, and make it your own. As you can see, this is based on my one sheet. Okay. Are there any questions about the one sheets that we've seen? I think the key point here is there's information that should be on your one sheet, depending on the host you're talking to, depending on the audience. And then work with a graphics designer or be your own graphics designer. And you can create the one sheet. It's very usable when you're talking to medium size and larger podcasters. I've even been on smaller shows and they've asked me for a one sheet. So can you have more than one sheet? Yes, you can. It depends on the audience. It depends on what you're going to be talking about also during that. And the example I've used is if I'm talking about living in international countries, because there are podcasts that talk about, folks who live overseas and expats, I would have a different one sheet than if I was on a podcast or trying to get on a podcast that just talked about small business and how to get started in small business. I would have a different one sheet for that. Does that make sense? Okay. And I will stop sharing here. How do I do that? There we go. So as you can see, there's not a lot to learn about creating a one sheet. It's fairly simple. The work comes in actually building your one sheet and getting all of that information in an aesthetically pleasing way. And you can take that as far as you want it, or go simple like Claudia did with her WordPress, not WordPress, I'm sorry, her Word document. Okay, I'd like to open it up now for questions, or if you have examples or you have a draft that you'd like us to look over today, it's a great chance to look over, because we have some folks here, very professional business people here online. So you get not only my input, but everyone's welcome to chime in. Tammy, go ahead.
You mentioned a short bio. How many words approximately would that be?
My short bio, I edited to fit on my one sheet. So that may not be the answer you're looking for. It depends what fits on your one sheet. Okay, I can share again and I'll show you. Let's see. Let's look at some examples. Okay, when I turn my head here, I'm looking at my other screen. So as you can see, it's just 2 paragraphs. I don't get into a lot of history here. More about what I do today and how I can bring value to the listeners of that podcast. Okay. But some of what someone may want to learn about me before having them on a podcast, they can find in my LinkedIn profile. They can find based on suggested questions. That often is it's kind of a window into what I do with the suggested questions that I provide. Let's see, Anastasia. So this whole side here in blue is her bio. It looks like Anne has a bio about the same size as mine, more or less, same number of words. Nancy has this section here. That's your bio, maybe slightly longer than mine, slightly maybe. And Claudia has almost half her page as her bio, a lot of space in there, but almost half a page. To the host so that they know enough about you that they're curious to know more. I have seen one sheets that have been 2 pages. I saw one that was 3 pages. But this was a fellow who has done a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. It was a little too much, I thought. I could have looked at his LinkedIn profile. I could have looked at his webpage and gotten that information, but he had it all in his one sheet. Is that incorrect? I don't prefer it, but I'm not sure I would go so. Keep it simple. You can learn more about podcast guesting and business growth by visiting gapologist.com and following the links there to more resources and more events that I'll be hosting. Thank you for listening to Entrepreneur Journeys. Remember to subscribe so you catch all the episodes, and check out the show notes for any free giveaways or gifts that were mentioned during this show. Entrepreneur Journeys is brought to you by �ヱ𝐴𝑥able, providing the insights, tools, and transformative structures to help you reach your business summit. I'm your show host, Joe Matz, and until next time, I hope your journey is filled with breathtaking views
and successful.
You can learn more about podcast guesting and business growth by visiting gapologist.com and following the links there to more resources and more events that I'll be hosting.
Thank you for listening to Entrepreneur Journeys. Remember to subscribe so you catch all the episodes, and check out the show notes for any free giveaways or gifts that were mentioned during this show. Entrepreneur Journeys is brought to you by 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬, providing the insights, tools, and transformative structures to help you reach your business summit. I'm your show host, Joe Matz, and until next time, I hope your journey is filled with breathtaking views and successful outcomes.